Welcome, dear listeners, to our exploration of one of the most pivotal moments in human history, the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War, a devastating struggle that ravaged the Greek world from 431 to 404 BCE, was a clash of ideologies, economies, and military might. At its heart were two city-states, Athens, with its formidable navy and thriving democracy, and Sparta, with its disciplined hoplites and rigid oligarchy. As we explore the earliest history of this conflict, we find ourselves in the midst of a world where alliances were forged and broken, where diplomacy was a delicate dance of words and deeds, and where the drums of war beat ever louder. Our tale begins in the early 5th century BCE, when Athens, under the leadership of Pericles, had emerged as a dominant power in Greece. The Athenians had built a powerful navy which allowed them to control the seas and protect their vast empire. Meanwhile, Sparta, with its formidable army, had established itself as a major force on land. As tensions between these two powers simmered, the seeds of conflict were sown. One of the key events that contributed to the outbreak of war was the dispute over Corcyra, a strategic island in the Ionian Sea. In 435 BCE, Corcyra, which had long been an ally of Athens, found itself under attack by the Corinthians, who were allied with Sparta. The Athenians, bound by their treaty obligations, sent a fleet to defend Corcyra, but they were careful not to engage the Corinthians directly, lest they spark a wider conflict. However, as the situation escalated, the Athenians and Spartans found themselves drawn into a vortex of alliances and rivalries that would eventually lead to war. The year 431 BCE marked the beginning of hostilities when the Thebans, allies of Sparta, attacked the city of Plataea, which was allied with Athens. The Athenians, under the command of Archidamus, responded by invading Spartan territory, and thus the Peloponnesian War had begun. As we explore this early period of the war, we find ourselves in a world of intricate politics and diplomacy, where city-states like Corinth, Thebes, and Argos played important roles. We see the rise of influential leaders, such as Pericles and Archidamus, who shaped the course of the conflict with their decisions and strategies. The early years of the war were marked by a series of bloody battles, including the Battle of Pylos in 425 BCE, where the Athenians inflicted a crushing defeat on the Spartans. However, despite these setbacks, the Spartans refused to yield, and the war continued to rage on, fueled by the unyielding determination of both sides. The period between 421 and 415 BCE is often considered the height of the Peloponnesian War, with both Athens and Sparta exerting their greatest efforts to gain the upper hand. It was during this time that some of the most brilliant generals of the ancient world emerged, including Alcibiades, Brasidas, and Demosthenes. These leaders would shape the course of the war with their innovative tactics and strategic decisions. One of the most significant events of this period was the Battle of Mantinea in 4118 BCE, where the Spartans, led by King Agis II, clashed with a coalition of Athenian and Argive forces. Although the Spartans emerged victorious, the battle marked a turning point in the war, as it became clear that neither side could achieve a decisive victory through conventional means. As the war dragged on, both sides began to suffer from the economic strain of prolonged conflict. The Athenians, who had initially relied on their powerful navy to control the seas, found themselves facing significant challenges in maintaining their fleet. Meanwhile, the Spartans, who had long been reliant on their hoplite infantry, began to experiment with new tactics, including the use of light infantry and cavalry. Despite these challenges, the Athenians continued to push forward, driven by the ambitious leadership of Alcibiades. In 415 BCE, they launched a bold expedition to Sicily, hoping to capture the rich city of Syracuse and gain a strategic foothold in the western Mediterranean. Although the expedition ultimately ended in disaster, with the Athenians suffering a crushing defeat at the hands of the Syracusans, it marked a significant turning point in the war. As we explore this period of the Peloponnesian War, we are struck by the sheer scale and complexity of the conflict. With multiple city-states and factions involved, the war became a labyrinthine struggle, with alliances shifting and new enemies emerging at every turn. And yet, despite the chaos and uncertainty, This was also a time of great cultural and intellectual achievement, with some of the most iconic figures of ancient Greece, including Socrates and Euripides, living and working during this period. The final years of the Peloponnesian War would be marked by some of the most brutal and devastating battles of the conflict, including the Battle of Aegospotami in 405 BCE, where the Athenians suffered a catastrophic defeat at the hands of the Spartans. The years following the Battle of Aegospotami were marked by a series of brutal and devastating battles, as the Spartans sought to crush the remnants of Athenian resistance. In 404 BCE, the Spartans, led by the brilliant general Lysander, laid siege to Athens, eventually forcing the city to surrender. The terms of the surrender were harsh, with the Athenians being forced to dismantle their fleet, surrender their overseas territories, and accept a puppet government imposed by the Spartans. As the war drew to a close, the city-state of Thebes, which had long been a thorn in the side of both Athens and Sparta, began to rise to prominence. In 403 BCE, the Thebans, led by the brilliant general Epaminondas, launched a successful rebellion against the Spartans, eventually establishing themselves as a major power in Greece. The aftermath of the Peloponnesian War was marked by a period of significant upheaval and transformation in ancient Greece. The war had weakened many of the city-states, creating a power vacuum that would be filled by the rising power of Thebes and, eventually, the Kingdom of Macedon under Philip II and his son Alexander the Great. The legacy of the Peloponnesian War can still be felt today, with its impact evident in the modern concept of politics, diplomacy, and warfare. The war marked a significant turning point in the development of Western civilization, as it led to the decline of the city-state system and the rise of larger, more complex forms of government. As we reflect on the Peloponnesian War, we are struck by the sheer scale and complexity of the conflict. It was a war that involved multiple city-states and factions, with alliances shifting and new enemies emerging at every turn. And yet, despite the chaos and uncertainty, this was also a time of great cultural and intellectual achievement, with some of the most iconic figures of ancient Greece, including Socrates, Euripides, and Thucydides, living and working during this period. In conclusion, dear listeners, our exploration of the Peloponnesian War has taken us on a journey through one of the most pivotal moments in human history. From the early conflicts between Athens and Sparta to the eventual decline and aftermath of the war, we have seen how this conflict shaped the course of Western civilization. As we close this chapter on ancient Greece, we are reminded of the enduring legacy of the Peloponnesian War, a conflict that continues to inspire and inform us to this day. As the great historian Thucydides once wrote, the Peloponnesian War was a war like no other, a war that would change the course of history forever. And as we look back on this conflict, we are reminded of the power of human ingenuity, creativity, and resilience in the face of adversity. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.